All right, it looks like we can go ahead and get started. So first, I just wanted to say thank you all for joining us today. And today we're going to be talking about 10 tips for successfully transitioning to a remote work environment. My name is Ashley McAlpin. I'm the Director of Marketing here at FormAssembly, and I'm joined by Joey Owens-Barham, our Director of Talent and Culture. And this is a really great topic. It's something that's really close to our hearts. We have been a remote first company for the last 12 years or so. And so we feel like we have a lot to share. And as companies are starting to transition into this kind of distributed work environment, we want to make sure that we share some of the things that we've learned along the way.
Definitely am super excited to be here as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Joey. So first, before we jump in, anyone who's not familiar with FormAssembly is an all-in-one web form building and data collection platform. So we combine the easy-to-use form builder with a robust integration with Salesforce and high security and compliance standards. We allow companies to save time, money, and efforts in their day-to-day processes and get the maximum benefit out of the data that they collect. So, our remote work experience, before we jump into kind of our 10 top tips, I think it's really important to make sure you guys understand why we feel like we're subject matter experts in this area. And like I said, we've been doing this for 12 years. This has been who we are at our core, and it's something that we're really passionate about because we believe that the future of work is distributed, that the best talent and the best people aren't necessarily all in one place. And why should we treat business like that? And that's kind of how we've approached our company forever. And so it's really exciting for us to be able to share what we've learned in this capacity with more people. So, like I said, for the past several years, FormAssembly has been successfully functioning and scaling as a remote team. You know, we went from one person 12 years ago to nearly 100 today, which is really exciting and something that I think has taught us a lot about distributed work over the years. Um, and with our experience, we want to help other companies who are trying to transition right now. We understand probably better than anyone that remote work can be difficult and that there are a lot of challenges that you face. And we want to make sure that we help provide any insight that we have or that we've gained over the last 12 years to help you all really navigate this time in a way that's, as effective and efficient as possible. So that's why we want to do this. So, without further ado, I'm going to go over the first couple tips that we have, and then I'm going to pass it to Joey, and he's going to kind of round us out. But the first tip, this is the first tip that we're offering for a lot of reasons, but personally, I'd say it's probably the most important tip on this entire list. And it might also be the simplest tip on the list. It's over communicate. Whenever we are working through a project or onboarding or hiring, this is something that we stress over and over and over again as a remote team. You have to over communicate. We encourage our teammates to be as clear as possible in written communication. That's huge for us because we do talk. We talk on video calls and we talk on phone calls and we work in real time often, but we also do a lot of our communication. Probably 70 to 80% of our communication is written. It's digital communication, whether that's in Slack or some of the other tools that we'll talk about later in this presentation. But with written communication, it is so critical that you are clear. And that's probably the biggest hurdle that we see as other companies try to transition to remote environments is if you don't stress the need to be clear and concise in your written communication, you're setting yourself up for failure. I mean, how many of us have gotten an email or a text message or a chat from someone and totally misread the intention behind it because it wasn't clear how they were communicating? I know everyone on my team has been in that position before. And so that's something that we really try to stress up front is make sure you over communicate and clarify yourself, especially in written communication. And then also clearly set expectations, plans, and goals for your employees to follow. It's hard to navigate transitioning to remote work when you kind of feel like you're dropped in the deep end of the pool, right? I know I came to Form Assembly after working in a non-remote environment for a couple of years, and that was one of the things that I was most worried about was how am I going to know what I am supposed to do, or how am I going to know what the expectations are? So we make sure as a team that we clearly set those expectations, plans, and goals right off the bat. Make it really clear what you want your team to be doing or how you want them to be communicating. And then use video chat to talk through things that can't be sorted out via chat. Remember when I was just talking about, getting a text or an email or a chat that just didn't, you read it completely wrong? Well, it takes so much longer to figure out that you read it completely wrong if you're going back and forth via chat. We found in our years of experience, jumping on a video call and sorting that out as soon as possible is the fastest way to resolution and to clearly communicate. So that's something that's really important as you kind of transition into a remote environment. You have to remember, if you were in the office, you'd probably walk by their cubicle and ask, hey, what did that email mean, or what were you looking for? And then you'd be able to talk it out face to face. That's what video calls allow us to do as a remote company. And then be transparent with time management, company updates, breaks, and etc. So make sure that you're communicating how you want your team to communicate with you. Are they online? Are they offline? Are they taking a break? Do they need, assistance with something? Are they going to be working earlier hours or later hours? Make sure that you set up communication guidelines that set your team up for success. So next is invest in quality technology. So as you transition into a work environment, investing in the right technology is more important than ever. Your team's going to rely on that technology. It becomes the primary source of communication. Like I said, you can't just walk by someone's cubicle and ask them a question. You need to be able to facilitate that through technology. As much as I think we all love email, email just doesn't cut it when you're working as a distributed team. There's too much of a delay. It's really not. It doesn't create a very collaborative or functional environment. And so we found that the first thing that we needed to do as a remote or distributed team was invest in a quality chat software. As a team, we've been through a few of these, right? Like we've tried pretty much any chat software and any project management solution that you can name. Right now, we are using Slack and we love it. And a couple of the reasons that we love using this type of technology are that it allows us to communicate both asynchronously and in real time. It allows us to segment our projects, our channels, and our teams so that we can have communications that match certain things that we're working on, and it's not just kind of one jumble of everything that's going on at one time. When you have 100 people working on something, it's really important that you can kind of segment out conversations and really communicate in a way that's effective and that works for the entire team. And then there are other tools that we have to use too, right? It can't all happen in Slack. Though Slack is great, there are other platforms that we need to use, like project management platforms, document collaboration tools, etc. So tools like Asana, like the Google Suite, using Google Docs, Google Meet, using Box. These are all tools that we use and love as a remote organization. And I would be amiss if I didn't say Form Assembly. We use Form Assembly ourselves all of the time. I think from a marketing perspective, we probably have over 200 forms that are live that we're using right now, not just on the marketing site. We use them for our marketing request form. Whenever someone on the team wants to request something from marketing, we have them fill out that form so that that will trigger a workflow for us so we can get that put into Asana and we can start working on that project. Um, Having tools that you've invested in that help streamline the communication and the workflow are absolutely critical to transitioning to a work from home or remote environment. So number three, keep systems secure. So our security team would absolutely hate it if we left this off the list. And I know that at a time like what we're going through right now is more critical and easier said than done, right? I know anyone in IT who's joining us today is probably thinking, that's the biggest hurdle that we've been up against as we transition to work from home. How do we keep everyone secure? So some things that we do at Form Assembly to make sure that security is a top priority for us, because obviously we are a data collection platform. We stand on the promise that we are keeping your information safe and secure, which means that all of our employees have to comply by the same standards in order for us to meet those high security compliance and privacy standards. So first, encourage employees to use password management tools like LastPass. And by encourage, we mean often mandate it. So make sure that any passwords that are being used are being secured and they're encrypted. Use encryption and two-factor authentication. Everything that we do has two-factor authentication. There's no way around it. We want to make sure that every system that's being logged into, every time that data is being accessed, that's being accessed in the most secure way possible. And then update systems and software when necessary. The team does this all the time. We have a dedicated security team who their entire focus is making sure that every single person who is working on FormAssembly's servers with our data, anything that relates to FormAssembly, is always on the most up-to-date softwares, that we're using the right tools, that everything that all of our configurations are secure and meeting the standards that we hold ourselves to. And then use a VPN when necessary. And this is something that's probably really common and that you probably were doing in your brick and mortar office. So making sure that you take those things that you're already working on and transition them to the work at home environment is really important. So my last tip before I hand it over to Joey is to develop written processes and procedures. So I know that sometimes, documentation and like process organization and process development can seem like, not the most fun part of anyone's job. But one thing that we found at FormAssembly being completely distributed is that this is critical. There is almost virtually no way to operate without developing, processes and documentation and procedures and how you handle each situation that might come your way, especially when you're dealing with, 10 different departments who do all different things, who are functioning and covering so many different aspects and avenues of business. It's impossible to stay aligned if we don't have documentation of how we do things. So just like in an office, we want to have those written down. We want to have them in a place where they can be easily accessed, that they are collaborative so that we can review them and talk about them. So we always encourage people who are asking us about remote work to document your remote work processes for current and future reference. So how do you onboard? How do we communicate? What are our expectations? How do we use Slack? Like questions like that, seem simple at first. They're not so simple when someone is doing it for the first time. So our biggest recommendation is, if you're transitioning to a remote environment right now for the first time, take some time to sit down and think about the process that you are following in office and what that has to look like as it transitions to a digital process, and then write it down and share it with the team, collaborate on it, try to get on the same page. That's going to help you, leaps and bounds over, just trying to all jump in and figure it out together. Make sure that you're documenting that so that you really can create a process that's going to be scalable as you continue to grow and as we continue to navigate this, uncertain time. And then, it's important to understand that time spent on that process documentation isn't time wasted. That's time that's ultimately going to gain you time in the long run. It's going to save frustration, it's going to save miscommunication. It's going to save you a lot if you do that legwork up front. And then written processes create clear directions and expectations. So, one of the things that we've heard recently is from some of our customers and our partners who are kind of in this weird transition from being in a brick and mortar office to working, completely distributed. And one thing that they've said is that, people are confused. Like it's hard to all get on the same page. And what, like with what are they supposed to be doing? How are they supposed to be doing it? Is, we used to have this process where we had 3 meetings and we all went to the same meeting, and then we had the printed papers and then we put them here and we did that, and now it's all digital. And how does that function? How do we do that? Or having these processes written down is going to set a clear expectation right up front. And it's going to help alleviate some of that stress that your team might feel as they transition to a remote environment. So we want to encourage you to, you know, take a look at all of the processes that you have ongoing in your office that kind of keep your business moving forward, and start there. Start with those. Start documenting, what might that look like if we're not all in the same office? Does it look the same, just a little different? Instead of meeting in the conference room for a call, we are meeting in a Google Meet for a call. Instead of, everybody just coming in the morning at 9 a.m., maybe you're saying hello in the morning at 9 a.m. and making sure that you see everybody face to face. Maybe it means that there's a stand up instead of just, waving across the office. You actually set a time and you set an intention to see your team every day. Start to document those processes and then figure out, what does it look like when you need something from another team? Maybe that used to look like an email that then you would just kind of get in a group and chat about and then move forward. But now that you're digital, it looks a little bit different. Kind of go through that process and figure out what needs to be documented and how can you better streamline this transition for yourself. So with all of that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Joey, and he's going to talk about engagement.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. These are all great tips. And I kept waiting to jump in, but you covered all the ground I was going to add to add color there. So this is fantastic. Continuing from that, encouraging engagement is something that when you are remote, it takes a little more active thought. It's different than, passing by a row of cubicles and just having that presence there. You actually have to be more cognizant of it and be more intentional. So when you have your daily and weekly meetings to keep teams on the same page, use those as opportunities to encourage and provide that positive feedback as well. Let people know that they're meeting expectations, kind of give that sort of cheerleader mentality that you have to do remotely when they can't read body language per se. For me, scheduling one-on-one meetings is important both in office and remote. So keep those remotely, have them one-on-one, have them weekly, have them bi-weekly, whatever works best for your team and your understanding of their needs. And the best thing about being remote for these one-on-one meetings, I'm sure we've all been in that situation where the conference room wall was paper thin and you're hearing things that you just don't want to hear, or maybe you're in that meeting and you have to be taught quietly because you don't know how much the sound bleed out is going to happen. When you're remote, that concern is gone because you are guaranteed to have no sound bleed out to the peers when you're in a Google Hangout having a one-on-one meeting. And lastly, I know Ashley mentioned earlier, like using Asana or other project management tools, that really helps keep the collaboration going so that you hit the benchmarks together and you can keep track of things as they are progressing as opposed to just the final deadline. It's really great to have all of these things in place to keep that productivity and to keep things moving in a way that you're used to when you're in an office. Finding time to connect. Again, this goes back to the intention of it. When you're in an office, you have the water cooler, maybe you have a cafeteria, maybe you have a break room or a designated place to go. Well, when you're remote, you can still have those places. You just have to make them virtual. Here at FormAssembly, we have a million fun Slack channels, whether it's homesteading or music or your pets or just hobbies and interests that are specific to that. And there's a whole place to go for people that intentionally want to talk about these things and have a little bit of a break and get to know their peers better. As a manager or supervisor, definitely take time to check in with your team. Have a little bit of time either at the beginning or the end of your meetings just to see how things are going. How's life? How's everybody feeling about things? Build that empathy and then keep that empathy during the transition to remote work. It might be challenging. You might have people that don't really like it. They want to go into the office. They want to sit in a cubicle, but by certain circumstances, it's just not possible right now. Be available to them, understand them, listen to them, and really set the tone that your availability, even though you're now remote, is not changing. And this is a great one, preventing burnout. There's a very strong misconception about remote workforce being less productive. And in my experience doing remote workforce for years and years, it's actually the opposite. People tend to work more fervently. They work harder when they're remote because work is always there. Their desk is in their home, it's in their sanctuary, it's there. When you have someone that's really, really passionate and really dedicated to what you're doing, which means you made a good hire. So that's great, check that off the list. But you want to make sure that they have that distance and can separate. So check in regularly, make sure that they're having dinner, they're able to kind of put work aside when working from home. And then if not, try to bring in new solutions, try to really help alleviate these inefficiencies. And obviously, you really want to be vocal and encourage people to take care of themselves, whether that's utilizing your PTO, taking those regular breaks, and maybe it's just having a down day. The great thing about Form Assembly is that we have a flexible policy where we really encourage people to work when they work best. So if you have a midday slump and it's just not your most productive time, don't put that pressure to make sure that those things happen during that slump. Maybe it's a morning, maybe it's evenings. Just you really find that peaks and valleys that work best for you to have your most productivity. And that is so key to preventing burnout and to being tuned into your own energy and making sure you're calendaring and you're doing your best work when you know you're at your most efficient peaks. Flexibility and patience are so key. Smooth transitions do not happen overnight. There's going to be some hiccups. There's going to be a Zoom call or a Google Hangout where the internet might get a little choppy and you might have to, have someone repeat themselves. A dog might be barking outside. You just kind of have to roll with it and know that as people get more into the rhythm for things, things will happen more smoothly. And again, allowing for flexibility around work schedules and breaks is fantastic, and it really empowers your team to do their best work when they do their best work. And again, be patient with hiccups and roadblocks. Rome wasn't built in a day, so you have to be patient with yourself too, even as a manager or supervisor, that you're going to get through this and you're going to develop these new patterns and new rhythms, and before you know it, it's going to be muscle memory and you're going to be right in the flow with it. Gathering feedback. And Ashley mentioned earlier about using forms and kind of getting feedback that way. We do that here at FormAssembly. When we onboard new team members, we use FormAssembly forms to gauge how they're doing with product training. How is this working? Very collaborative, responding to certain questions, making sure that people know what's going on, what's expected of them, and what they need to do to be successful. Same as in office, same as remote, you really want to have that really, really great bridge of communication between your team and what you want from them. We recently just launched a culture survey here at FormAssembly where we have one 10-minute baseline survey to just kind of get a landscape of how things are going. And we're using that to build follow-up surveys throughout the year based on the initial feedback. So it's not a one and done thing. It's you start it out, you get some data, and then you build from that data and you keep things growing and progressing. Absolutely, that can be done remotely as if you were in an office. And the most important thing about getting feedback is to respond to it, acknowledge it, let people know that when they fill out a form and they are giving their feedback that it is going somewhere, and it just helps building culture. It's building the foundations of your company to be stronger, better, and more efficient. Working together. This is great. In office, remote, we're all in this together. We're the same team, we're the same company. Everyone is transitioning. Everyone has some sort of emotional response to this, whether they're excited and enthusiastic and pumped, or maybe they're a little trepidatious, maybe they're a little afraid of change. Everything is a valid emotion, and your role as a manager and supervisor is to recognize that and help everyone get through it and come out cohesively. Try not to let your team develop martyrs. It's not a bad thing to raise your hand or ask for clarification. Encourage your team members to say, hey, I don't get this, or maybe even ask them, say, is there anything I can make more clear? Can I explain that differently? And then collaboration. Same as you're in an office, there are so many tools and technologies and systems out there that can enable you to collaborate in real time, whether it's a shared Google Doc or a spreadsheet, or maybe a whiteboarding software that you can work together on things. There's so many resources out there to keep real-time momentum moving, just as if you were in a conference room in an office downtown. And that's that. Ashley, anything you want to kind of add to that, or tips here?
Yeah, no, I think that that was wonderful. And thanks so much, Joey, for all of those tips. I think that these are going to be really helpful, and hopefully and hopefully we've got some good questions here. So before we, wrap this up, I just want to open it up for any questions. So if you have additional questions, feel free to drop them into the chat now, and Joey and I will answer those. All right, so we've gotten a couple of questions already, so we can go ahead and jump right in. So, Joey, I think we can kind of tag team this first one. So, the first question that we got is, how have you guys created norms for when to use email versus Slack? So, this is one of my favorite questions, because I think just about every person who joins our team, or who is, like most of you all, transitioning to a work from home environment for the first time, um, they always have a little bit of confusion around, I mean, my last company, we use email all the time. Like I just want to send an email. How, like, when do we decide when to do what? And at Form Assembly, what we've kind of landed on is everything that has to do with in team communication happens in Slack first. Slack is our source of truth. It's the easiest way for us to find conversations, to easily access and share conversations. It creates a level of transparency that email just doesn't offer. And then also it's much more real time than email is. So for us, especially on my team, on the marketing team, we don't use email for anything that doesn't touch a third party. Everything is in Slack. And that really kind of sets the precedent for us that communication is going to be open and transparent, and asynchronous when it needs to be. Joey, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, there really isn't a one size fits all for this. You kind of have to feel it out for what your team needs and communicates. I've been at some companies where Slack is used as the equivalent of knocking on a door or kind of that immediacy. We don't do that here at FormAssembly. We use kind of Slack kind of universally. A good rule of thumb, though, is it effective for you. So if you find yourself writing a novel on a Slack message and you're going for, a couple paragraphs, you might want to reconsider that as an email. More composure, more time to kind of think it through and compose it and send for someone to read and digest kind of in a more slower cadence. Where Slack is more like, this is my thought, this is what I want you to respond to, let's go, kind of go from there is how I tend to use Slack versus email.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Joey. And like you said, I think it really depends on the team. But especially as you're transitioning, I think we just want to encourage you all, to make sure that you're communicating as openly and as clearly as possible. Because that's really where we've seen most of the kind of tension in teams that are used to operating one way that are now trying to operate in a completely different manner. And so making sure that you kind of set those standards and then set the process, like we talked about. Make sure you document what your approach is going to be and kind of what those standards look like. So we've gotten a lot of good questions. So we'll move on to the next one. Um, the next question is, what project management tools do you like best? I think this one is kind of the same. It depends on what you're doing, right? So the type of team, the types of projects that you're working on, those all make a difference in which project management solution is going to be best for your team. From a marketing perspective, we like Asana right now. We've tried dozens of different options and alternatives. Our product team uses Jira and the Atlassian suite. It really depends. There's a lot of different workflows that you can operate off of. Um, but something like Asana or Trello, there's a few free options there too. If you're not really sure what you want to try out, a lot of companies with project management solutions offer trials and things like that. So it can kind of let you get in there and see what seems like it's going to work best. Overall, you just want to make sure that you find a project management solution that allows you to kind of be really transparent with your team, so everybody who needs to have access is able to see all of the projects that are in progress. And then something with workflow management is really helpful. So if one person signs off, it'll trigger to the next person. That's something we found really valuable in all those solutions that we use too. And for some things, even kind of depending on what types of projects or work that you're doing, like I said, that's a huge range of things, right? Like marketing is totally different from if you work in a healthcare organization and you're trying to, figure out different policies and procedures. Like those are gonna be very different workflows that you need. So even using something like Form Assembly or a different web form kind of workflow and integrating that with Salesforce, we've seen that done really well and really effectively as well. Joey, do you want to add anything else to the project management?
That's great. No, you covered it all.
Awesome. Okay, so let's see. This is a good one, Joey. I'll let you kind of take first. Outside of Slack, do you have any tips for team members to share their availability during the day? This is something we're struggling with in the transition.
That is a fantastic question, and something that I, really stress to all of the new team members that join Form Assembly is just really hyper communicate. So we have a flexible time off policy here. So, we really give a lot of time off. We have a very dynamic program with that. And so if it's less than a half day, we don't require our team to use PTO. So to make that availability really clear, we ask people to use their Google Calendar and mark when they're going to be unavailable. If you have an appointment, you don't have to say what it is per se, but you can say busy offline or something, just so that you really set the expectation of when you're available and when you're stepping away. And that's really helpful. So if you ping somebody on Slack and they're not responding, you're kind of questioning where are they, you can look at their Google Calendar and you can see, oh, they're busy, they're in a meeting, they're out, they're unavailable. And we also have a separate Google Calendar as well here that's a general time off important announcement. So if someone's taking, a half day to go volunteer and to go help in their communities, maybe that's where they have it documented, and really create those structures and systems and really communicate the expectations for when people are on and offline. And that way, no one has any question marks. Has really worked well for us.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Joey. And if your organization isn't using the Google Suite and you don't have that visibility into others' calendars, um, that's something that, I think at the nuclear team level, what you can encourage depending on where you are. So if you are managing a smaller team, make sure that you talk to your smaller team and say, hey, every morning when we're first starting to work, if you're not using a chat software and you're still kind of operating out of email, say we're going to start an email thread and we're going to say good morning, and we're going to, set the expectation for the day of these are the times that I'm working versus when I'm not working. I really would encourage you all to find some kind of a chat solution. I know it might seem like that's, at the bottom of the list of things that I'm worrying about as I transition into a remote environment, but a lot of these solutions offer free environments, especially for smaller teams. If you're, not necessarily thinking about like the entire company globally, but you're worried about your, nuclear team that has 10 to 15 people, you can often find a free version of a lot of these chat softwares. And they allow you to set a status as well. So you can be away. They allow you to see like read receipts when somebody has read your message, things like that, that really can help that transition be a little bit more smooth. I know that a couple of times we've had new people join my team specifically. And it's a very new different thing. If you're not used to working from home, it's hard to balance, like, if I'm gonna walk away or step away, do I need to tell someone, do I not need to tell someone? And then when you're on the other side, like Joey was saying earlier, and you're trying to reach someone on your team and you just can't get a hold of them, like, what does that look like? One thing that I've made sure to do with my team is set that expectation right up front. Our expectation is that you work between the hours of 8 and 4. And if you're going to be away for an extended period of time, meaning more than 30 minutes, that you just let us know. Like, it's not asking permission. It's just let us know so that we're aware of whether or not you're going to be at your quote unquote desk or couch or stool or whatever you're working at. And so those are some ways to kind of mitigate that if you don't have access to the calendar. But like Joey was saying, making sure that you have kind of that transparency is one of the most important things that you can do transitioning to a remote environment. So let's see. We've got a couple of other questions. Oh, Joey, this is a good one as well. So do you have any suggestions on how to keep morale up?
Wow, that is a great question, especially right now with the current global pandemic and things that are going on. There's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of uncertainty, and you might be working in an industry that's been really heavy hit by this pandemic, and there's a lot of instability and uncertainty. To me, the best way to get through that is to be as transparent as you reasonably can be. People just want to know that they're not being left out. They want to know what to expect. I mean, generally as human beings, we like to prepare, right? We like to guard ourselves and be equipped for what's coming down the road. And if people are feeling left out, or they don't know, or they just are not confident in what's going on, just to be really transparent, like, hey, this is the story right now. This is our plan. This is our business's pathway through it, and that will really help people feel better, or at least knowing that they're being included. And even if it's not the best news, or maybe there's just uncertainty at the top level, and there's nothing that you can really alleviate, but just to let them know that they're looped in, and that know that hey, like, we're all included. This is a team. This is a unit, and we're all going to get through this together. Will really help morale from my experience. Ashley, anything to add from your perspective on that one?
Yeah, no, I think that that was a great answer, Joey. And I think a couple of things specifically that we're doing at FormAssembly right now, because so we're not transitioning to a remote environment. We've been remote, so that's not one of the things that we struggle with. But just like everyone else in the world right now, all of our employees are thinking about COVID-19 and they're thinking about this pandemic, and there is some hesitation and some uncertainty across the board with everyone, I think. And so a couple of things that we've done as a team to really, I guess, reinforce what Joey was talking about. First, we have a COVID-19 assistance program where we're offering free services and our platform to people direct with projects directly related to COVID-19. And so one thing that we're doing is every Monday morning in our all team meetings. So that's another pointer, right? Like we make sure that we get the entire team, all almost 100 of us, on a call every Monday morning, and we kind of go over updates, big department updates, updates on things like the COVID-19 assistance program. And then anything else that our CEO wants to communicate is communicated in that meeting. But what we've been really intentional about is giving an update on the organizations that were able to help through that, and that kind of is really set. It's helped with morale with our team, because they know that not only are we out. I think everybody's trying to figure out, like, how do we get through this as a people, as a company, whatever. Like, how do we get through this? But it helps kind of reaffirm that we're trying to do what's best, and give whatever we can to help everyone through this time. And then the second thing that we've been doing in those Monday meetings is giving financial overviews. So making sure that we're as transparent as we possibly can be with the team, and whether or not this is impacting us, and things like that. So that might look different depending on the type of organization that you are a part of, and kind of what you do. But I think that level of transparency really helps build morale, because it lets the team know that you're not just letting them sit in the dark, and they're the floor might fall out from underneath them. We want our team to never be surprised by anything that happens, and so we want to make sure that we're communicating as clearly and as transparently as we can, throughout every situation, including this pandemic. So I think that those are some good options to help kind of keep morale up, and make sure that people know that, like, you do care about them as a company. Okay, so our next question, also related to COVID-19. What's your best advice for working from home during COVID-19 when you can't venture out to a fresh environment or change of scenery? So I can kind of attack this one first. You know, I think one of the things that is interesting about companies that are starting to transition to the work from home environment right now, is that we see this question a lot. Like, well, how, now I can't even leave. Like, I'm just stuck in my house. And for me, it's kind of funny, right? I've been at Form Assembly for 4.5 years. And I can't even tell you the last time I left my house to work. My biggest piece of advice is to find a place in like a space in your home that is your workspace. So whether that's converting a corner of your guest bedroom to be your office, or taking over a portion of the living room, or setting yourself up in the kitchen if you don't have space for that, kind of create a dedicated environment that is your office, and leverage that. And then when you need to get out and you just feel like, okay, I've been in my house too long, take a walk, go outside, stand on your back patio if you live in a city and you can't go walk on the street. Like, just take some time and, like, catch your breath. But I think that there are a lot of ways to kind of facilitate a work environment in your home without leaving. And in fact, I think that you'll find, if you end up, transitioning for a longer period of time when you can leave the house again, that sometimes going out and working from a coffee shop or something is really, not as luxurious as it might seem from the onset. I think that's something that all of us, when we're thinking about, oh, work from home, we think, oh, that's cool. You could work from anywhere. You could go to the beach and sit on the beach and work. And that's really just not practical. We found it's not very practical for us on our team. But I do think that there are ways that you can kind of switch it up in your own home as well, and really create a space that's conducive to work, and also allows you to have a separate place where you can decompress too, right? Like, we don't want our entire home to start feeling like our entire office, and that's a risk that you run when you have work from home or distributed teams. So making sure that you really encourage your team to set up dedicated spaces where they can be working versus where they're not working. I think that's really important. Joey, did you want to add anything to that?
That's perfect. And the only thing I would add is just generally ergonomically, make sure you change your position every 20, 30 minutes. That's a pro tip to save your back and to save your body. It's just, if you find yourself hunched over a stool, be cognizant of that and then maybe switch to the couch, maybe go find a desk or just make sure you're always moving your body. That's the best thing to kind of get your brain refreshed and also make your body just feel better is just to keep moving, keep changing. And then what I try to do, not current global pandemic situation withstanding, is leave the house once a day. So before I would try to go out and get lunch, a couple times a week or go for a walk. I've got a dog, kind of get some fresh air with them. Um, just little things like that, just again being more intentional about it. So if you're in an office and it's new and you're like, oh, I can go down the street to the restaurant and go grab a bite, but when you're at home you're not really used to that. So being more intentional about that, those fresh air breaks is the one thing I would add.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And because we are, all living in the middle of COVID-19, and I think probably 100% of the people on this call are in under some kind of stay-at-home order or quarantine. I would say that just, making sure that you just step outside, right? Like where we are being asked to stay at home, but you're not being asked to necessarily stay, in your living room. I would venture to say almost all of us have, some kind of an area outside where you can stand and be 6+ feet away from another human. And I would encourage you to do that, even if it's just walking to get the mail. Sometimes that really helps change up your environment for a little bit. So I encourage you to do that. Okay, so we've got one more question, it looks like. So this one says, I feel like most of my time since transitioning to leading a remote team has been spent on Zoom and video meetings, much more often than when my team was in the office. Any tips to balance the amount of time used on video calls versus actually getting work done? I love this question. I think that this is a really great question and something that I think is really common in companies that are transitioning so dramatically in the way that they work. It's really comfortable for us if we're used to being in an office and seeing people every day. It's really comfortable for us to just like jump head first into the deep end of video meetings, right? And like meetings, meetings, meetings. We need to have meetings about everything. It's the only way we can communicate. The first thing that I want to recommend is that you change that mentality, right? Work does not have to happen in the same room. Work does not have to, like, you don't have to see someone's face to get work done. And that's hard to kind of wrap our brains around, especially when we're so used to working that way. But one thing that we try to do is we try to only have meetings when absolutely necessary. And meetings are necessary, right? Like, I mean, my days are pretty full of meetings, but those meetings, before we set a meeting, we usually ask ourselves the question, can this be done in text? Like, can this be a conversation that we have asynchronously, that we can collaborate in, whether that's in a Google Doc or if it's in something like Slack or if it's in an email? Like, can this be a conversation we start somewhere else and then jump on a meeting when you've hit a roadblock? So instead of just starting on a meeting, because we all know that meetings are not as effective as we want them to be in most cases. It's a lot of ideation, it's a lot of talking, it's a lot of trying to get on the same page, but then you leave and just like you've said in your question, like when do you get the work done if you're jumping into another call? So what we try to do is really encourage asynchronous communication and work, which allows us to kind of prioritize things on our team, especially. So my I guess my biggest takeaway from with all of that being said is try to look at the meetings that you're having and identify 2 or 3 types of those meetings that really aren't necessary. You're not walking away with a lot of action items. They're really probably more taxing on your team than they are productive, and then figure out how you can accomplish the goals you went into those meetings trying to accomplish in another manner, whether that's using a project management tool, chat, like I said, a Google Doc, something like that, where you can kind of communicate asynchronously. Joey, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add is just, think about if you were all in that office and if you were all in that brick and mortar, would you ask every single person to get up from their desk and walk with you to a conference room? If the answer is no, you probably don't need to go into a video meeting to have that same conversation.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
point. Yeah, that's a great point. And don't feel bad about it, right? I think that's a really natural response for all of us is, okay, we need to get on a call and get on the same page because when you're feeling uncertain and when, the entire way that you work is being shifted and thrown up in the air, it's very easy for us to kind of fall back on things that feel most familiar. And so I think that it's fine that you've gone through this little transition and now it's time to take a step back and say, okay, what process can I put in place so that we're more productive as a team, and also so that my team can stay happy because I know from experience that teams don't like to be in meetings all day either, just like we as leaders don't. So making sure that you kind of ask yourself those questions. But the we had a couple of other questions around this presentation, whether or not it would be emailed to you or if we could share the slides. We are going to send that out to everyone who registered. So usually we send the recording as well as a quick summary out 2 days after the presentation. So this one should be going out in the next couple of days. So we'll make sure you all get a copy of this and the presentation as well. Oh, let's see. I think we've got, yep. Can we get the slides to pass along to our managers? Yep, absolutely. You can forward that email when it comes out to everyone, and it'll have the presentation recording and the Q&A as well. So be able to have all of this and share it as well. We really appreciate you all joining us today. I know that it is not always easy to grab, 45 minutes out of the middle of your workday, but I hope that this has been really helpful for you, and I hope that you've been able to pick up some tips to how to transition to working from home and working remotely. And we want you to know that we're here for you. If you have questions, you can definitely reach out to us. And if form assembly is something that you think could be a part of that conversation in helping you to kind of navigate remote data collection as well, we'd like to talk about that too. So feel free to reach out. We'll be sending out these slides. Joey, did you have any final thoughts?
No, just again, reiterating my thanks and appreciation for everybody joining and being thoughtful for your teams and your employees and trying to make life easier as everyone pretty much transitions to working from home. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.